Many thanks for staying tuned. The emergency rule in Rivers State has consistently generated conversations around constitutionality, legality, and appropriateness. We want to approach this today from the social contract perspective that was freely entered into between the Rivers people and the democratically elected government of Siminalaya Fubara. Now, what are the valid concerns for the Rivers people? Pending the duration of this administrative rule, how can the cordial coexistence be maintained, especially if the Rivers people feel the sole administrator arrangement is alien to them? Well, to help expand this conversation, we have in the studio Director, Center for Human Rights and Accountability Network, Otwekong Franklin Isang joins us. Hi, Otwekong, you're welcome.
Good morning, terrific Tuesday, and good afternoon, fabulous Tuesday.
Indeed.
Be with you guys today.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Pleasure always.
Well, we're looking at some of the issues basically in the Niger Delta region. And of course, well, before we look at the topic, let's just have a glimpse of a little bit of your idea concerning the recent Take It Back protests and the activities that turned out during the protests.
I think it is a given right to, right. It's a guaranteed right in our Constitution, section 39, freedom of expression. As I'm here, I have the freedom to express my thoughts.
Good.
Section 40, guarantees the freedom of assemblage. I can choose to attend any church. I can choose to assemble anywhere. Section 41 gives the freedom of movement. That is why I can travel from here to anywhere. So the right for peaceful protest is guaranteed. That was why when we saw the way it was handled by the authorities, we felt so bad about it, because even if you see Article 9 and Article 11 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights also guarantees the freedom of expression, the freedom of movement, and the freedom of peaceful protest.
Now, this
So these rights are given rights. Now, any action that will inhabit that right, that will stop anybody from expressing or holding this right, is completely unconstitutional and unlawful. So we keep on hearing police saying you don't have police permit, and we keep asking, which other police permit do you need? If you read the judgment that was given in 2003, when ANPP had a protest across the country over the outcome of the election, the IGP of police ordered that the police should stop it in Kano, and that the ANPP and the party leaders challenged the matter, and they went to a federal high court. The federal high court held that the Public Order Act, which the police is trying to hide under to ask for police permit, is completely alien to our constitution. The IGP appealed the judgment to appeal court. Appeal court upheld the trial court position. The IGP went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court affirmed that the Public Order Act, which the police is hiding under to request for police permit, is null and void. So the police and other authorities should allow Nigerians to express themselves peacefully.
Well, one of the issues which the protesters had mentioned is the state of emergency rule in Rivers State, and the president had made it clear that the state of emergency is to ensure there is peace and orderliness in Rivers State, is to ensure that activities that seem to have brought in some political crisis in the state are held down, and perhaps sensibility restored or normalcy restored in Rivers State. Do you think it was necessary to even engage in any form of protest, considering the fact that there is a sole administrator who is managing the affairs of the state at the moment?
The mention of the name sole administrator is completely alien to our constitution again. When President Bola Tinubu made the pronouncement, we came up to challenge it because it is not known to the constitution. We are operating a democracy ruled by constitution, and every action you have to do as a public officer that must be in line with the constitution of the country. Section 1 sub 2 of our constitution says that no part of Nigeria shall be governed without a constitution. And section 11 says if there are crises in the House of Assembly and they are unable to carry out their functions, the National Assembly can take over their function and begin to legislate and make laws for the state. And section 188 of our constitution also spells out the procedure to get a governor out of office, because a governor is elected to stay in office for 4 years. And that section 188 says if a governor can be impeached, a governor can choose to resign, a governor can be removed from office if he is unable to carry out his function. Section 305, which the president hide under to declare the state of emergency, is very clear. There must be a war, there must be threat to public life, there must be health emergency, like we had COVID-19, that it became a threat all over the country. Then, for this to be effective, the governor can also request that the president should declare it in his own state. And where the governor fails to request, the president has the right to declare it. And when you declare, you make the pronouncement, you will send the request to the National Assembly that will use the 2/3 of each of the chambers to adopt or rectify it. What has happened? There is no war in River State. There is no threat of invasion. There is no health emergency. All we're having there is political, crisis, political disagreement amongst, party chieftain. The Assembly, Supreme Court has ruled that the Assembly under Martins Amehule, subsists, and that the government should go and present the budget of the state before the Assembly led by Martins Amehule. So the Supreme Court has ruled that there is Assembly in the state. Now, when the president made the pronouncement, he has overruled the Supreme Court position. And the Supreme Court even said that the budget of the funds of the state should be withheld until the budget is presented before the House of Assembly led by Martins Amehule. Now the funds have been released to someone that is appointed to go and govern the state. And the person who was appointed to govern the state was sworn in with a constitution which is not known to his office. Which document doesn't mention his office. So we're having several issues. The governor has immunity under section 308. Now the governor has been removed from office. Can he be tried? Can he be arrested? What happens to the governor? How do you run the state? He has a tenure of 4 years. The House members have a tenure of 4 years. Now you have shortchanged the governor who was elected by the people to govern for 4 years. So this is where we are having several issues. So those who are protesting, asking that our constitution be restored and law and order be maintained in River State, are in line with the law.
So, Chuck Franklin, how would you look at the disobedience to the Supreme Court ruling by both parties? I mean, yes, the ruling was in favor of the House of Assembly led by Martins Amehule, but then we could see that in events after those the particular ruling, we saw that they couldn't still work together. And don't you think that this is what informed the president to step in and make the decision he made? In that instance, what would you say would be the appropriate measure that should have been taken when the two parties clearly were not still working together? The governor tried to go to the House of Assembly to present the 2025 budget. He was denied entry. What would have been the measures that could have been taken to resolve the issues? Even the president had tried to step in to bring some sort of resolution between the executive and the legislature. It still failed.
First, is there a way the matter could have been resolved without violating our constitution? The answer is yes. Second, is the governor an appointee of Mr. President? The answer is no. Third, are the House members appointees of Mr. President that can hire and fire or suspend them? The answer is no. Fourth, has there ever been the same situation in this country where a president declared emergency in some states and the governor still exists, like we had in Adamawa, Yobe, and Borno, when Goodluck Jonathan was the president, and he declared emergency in those states due to insurgency in those areas. and the governor was still there working with the president to resolve those issues? The answer is yes. So when you build something on nothing, it becomes nothing. What the president has done today is to use sledgehammer to kill butterfly, and by so doing he has violated several sections of our constitution which he swore to uphold. Now, what could have been done? Supreme Court has ruled that the funds of the state be withheld until the governor present the budget of the state before the assembly led by Martins Amehule. Supreme Court also ruled that the local government chairman who we are purportedly elected, during election was held and they were elected, sworn into office, should be dissolved. And the governor came back to River State and those local government chairmen were removed from office. And like you have rightly said, the governor now took steps to present the budget of the state, like you said, and the assembly did not allow him access to present the budget. I'm not speaking for any side of the, any of the political parties or political actors here, but now you have seen that the Supreme Court has made a pronouncement. When you violate the law, what happens? You resort back to the law will give you remedy. If the Supreme Court has made a pronouncement that is not being kept, what you do is you file contempt proceedings in the court. Have any of the parties going to go back to the court and say, court, you made this pronouncement, this party has not kept it? So the president was supposed to enforce the law as was pronounced by the Supreme Court. Number one is that the assembly should receive the budget of the state and let the governor go there and then meet them. Number two, that the local government chairman that were elected should be dissolved, and they were all dissolved. So there is no how you can justify illegal act, an act that is unlawful, not known to law. If this stands, it is a complete dangerous precedent that will be kept, because in future you could have a political party who might desire to own a state whose party that is being governed by another party, and they could use their president to take over the state by declaring emergency in those states. That is why we are afraid that our democracy is under threat. So those who have come out to demand for rule of law, to demand for our constitution to be protected, to demand that democracy be returned and restored back to River State, are within the realm of the law. Now, let me add this. When the military takes over any democratic setting, the first thing that they do is to abrogate the House of Assembly, the parliament, because that is the heart of democracy. Now, the president went ahead to take over the function of the assembly and took it to the Federal Executive Council. It was the Senate and the reps that now modified it to say, no, we are the one by section 11 of our constitution that should take over the function of the assembly, because you have now removed the assembly. So the action of the president is ultra vires, null and void, and of no effect based on our constitution.
Well, you have mentioned earlier concerning the payment of salaries, the release of funds for River State allocation. Would you have preferred that the local government workers or public office or public workers be owed salaries? Because considering the fact with the political issues and rift between the executive and the legislature, there wasn't a possibility, or there wasn't a resolution in sight maybe in a couple of months, as there was still back and forth. Would you have preferred that the sole administrator, even while in office, still owes salaries of the workers?
I don't, you see, I consider it, the word sole administrator is very strange in my ears in a democratic setting. Except you want to tell me that we are operating, let me use the word, Iraqi's constitution, where some part will be governed by another law, some part will be governed by the other law, and then anybody can choose any law to obey. Otherwise, when a constitution is breached, you go back to the law. Let the court tell you, give you the remedy, the necessary sanctions. Now, the civil servants who were owed salaries because the court ruled that the funds of the state be withheld because the governor refused to submit the budget to the assembly led by Martins Amehule, but he was using four-man assembly, which is very strange to democracy. A house of over 30 persons, you are using only 4 persons to run your budget. And the court now ruled that what you are doing is not known to law. Take your budget to a house that is known to law. Now, like Savior has said, the governor has now taken steps to correct those abnormalities by going back to what the law says. And like you have rightly said, he was not allowed access to the assembly. What should have been done? Should have been Mr. President, whose power it is to enforce the judgment of courts in Nigeria, should have been to invite the assembly, invite the governor, and then they will now resolve on a date for the governor to appear before the assembly and submit their budget of the state. That is what should have been done. Now, for the president to sit and say, because I am the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Section 305 gave me power to declare emergency, I have declared emergency in your state, the governor go on 6 months suspension, and then the assembly go on 6 months. It's not known to law. The president has even done the worst things than what is happening in River State by trying to abolish our constitution. Now, which law are we now using in River State? The person who is now there, has now dissolved, dissolved all the boards, including boards that have tenure in constitution. And he came and he has dissolved them, and then he sacked persons who were appointed by both parties, and then he came and then began to, the funds that was withheld based on the Supreme Court order has now been released to him, who is now going to, draw up a budget. How will he now be able to capture the interest of Rivers people? So automatically, what is happening in Rivers State today is undemocratic. No matter how you twist it, the president didn't get it right this time around, and the president needs to retract that pronouncement and correct it. The parliament that would have given us the hope, the Senate and the reps, also fell short of their duties. You don't use voice vote, for God's sake, to rectify what the constitution says that it must be 2/3. You now use a voice vote to say the yes have it. The yes have what? There must be a record of proceeding of voters who voted for what. Now we have known the senators who voted for yes and those who voted for no, and then we now look at it. Were they up to 2/3 majority? To have it in the House of Reps, you have at least 220 rep members. Then you must have at least 73 senators to be able to pass that position of the president. So the whole thing is unlawful, is undemocratic, and unconstitutional, and needed to be reviewed by the president.
Okay, we'll check on Franklin. Another angle that I wanted us to look into closely is the social contract, the aspect of the social contract entered into by the Rivers people and the government of Siminalayi Fubara. Now, if you looked at a video that we have that will be displayed on screen right now, one of the protesters had spoken about the fact that they consider the sole administratorship arrangement currently alien to them because they recognize the Siminalayi Fubara government because that's the government they voted for. Now, how does this affect leadership, governance generally in Rivers State? And to what extent would you say that there are moves that can be taken to restore democratic governance in Rivers State, as was the case before now? Do you think that there are steps that the government can take currently in light of the realities on ground? Are the parties ready to work together? Is the question that is on everybody's lips. Do you think that the legislature have learned their lessons, the executive, the governor of the state are ready right now to return to the drawing board and begin to work together to restore the normalcy that Rivers State was characterized by?
Well, I think if you want my opinion, I will freely give Mr. President. Status quo ante bellum be maintained. Go back to where we were before you declare the state of emergency. And what is the position? Where you have the governor and the speaker, Martis Amehule, that cannot meet eyeball to eyeball. Can you, Mr. President, invite the two of them? Because this whole power struggle now is about political structure. I've heard nobody has mentioned the Minister of State, the Minister of FCT rather, in this matter. But I've heard people say that he is the brain behind the Martin Amehule's, faction of the House of Assembly. Now, can Mr. President, who is the appointer of the Minister of FCT, summon the Minister of FCT? Yes, he can do it. Can he invite the governor of Rivers State? Yes, he can. Can he also invite the speaker? Yes, he can. So this battle is about a tripod, struggle. You have the governor, you have the speaker, and you have the minister of FCT. Now, you have three persons at war. The president is in the middle. He should have been a father, inviting these three persons, only three of them, and then get it resolved. What is the struggle? The budget of the state is not being presented before the assembly. Go and present the budget before the assembly. And once that is done, the whole thing is resolved. And then the assemblies will now be making laws for the good governance of the state. Like you asked me about social contract. Of course, yes. Those in Rivers State, they didn't vote for what they are having today in Rivers State. They voted for a governor. They voted for their assembly members. So when you now say you suspend, are you now suspending them because you have power to suspend them? The answer is no. Our constitution has 320 sections and 8 chapters. None mentioned suspension of a governor. A governor is somebody who is elected to govern the state for a given period of time. So also it is the assembly. And if you want to remove the governor, you must follow what the constitution says in section 188. You must follow the procedure. You don't have to say you stay, you suspend. How do you suspend? Well, the governor has immunity over criminal prosecution. Now, who occupies the government house for the next 6 months? Who occupies it? So invariably, in the eyes of the law, you have two persons running the state. One is the governor that was elected, that has the people's mandate, and the other is the one that has the president's mandate. So who is now going to run the state? And you now have a chaotic arrangement where all the project that was initiated by the governor has now been stalled. All those that were appointed by the governor has now been removed. And those who were appointed before the governor came into office by virtue of the constitution of the country has now also been removed by way of the vote dissolving all the boards. So what the president has done is undemocratic. I have said it here. And the president has the magic wand to revise it by saying, I have now revoked that emergency rule in Rivers State. Let us now go back to where we were. I have brought in fact, the National Assembly made a proviso in their passage of the rule. They said that there should be a committee to mediate between the warring factions. Since Ibn Abbas took over as the one running Rivers State, has there been any committee put in place? Have you heard of town hall meetings with those in Rivers State? Have you heard of anybody mediating? The answer is no. So what do you want to achieve? So after 6 months, you will review another 6 months. So invariably, somebody who was elected to govern for 4 years will now be governing for 3 years. Because from the look of things, there is no step so far taken to resolving the political crisis. You still have that two factions still holding their battles, holding their axes from both ends, still drawing the daggers from both ends. And the president haven't done this. I've not even called the stakeholders to say, come back here, let us now meet and resolve it. So there is no attempt to break the peace that caused the emergency rule, and it therefore means that after the 6 months, there will be another extension of another 6 months.
What's the role of the people in all of this? Do they have a role to play in sort of letting their voices get heard?
That is what they have just done yesterday. The peaceful protest that the people did was a way to send a message that, look, what is happening in the Rivers State today is unlawful. It's not what we voted for. It's not what we bargained for. We are operating a democracy governed by a constitution, and so what is happening today in our state, we don't like it. That is the first thing that the people have done, and they have done it yesterday. And instead of the authorities to listen to their voices and take steps to resolve it, they went as far as tear gassing them, arresting them and beating them up. You don't do this. I think a few days ago you saw a protest in US when you saw a large kind of people coming out to protest against Trump's policy. And you see the police were there guiding them. Because when you have good governance, it affects a policeman, it affects everybody. And when the good governance comes, it doesn't say because you are a policeman, you don't have to benefit from it. So the police owe a duty to protect people who are engaging on peaceful protest so that the protest wouldn't be hijacked. In this case, they are the ones that were even fueling the protest, making it become chaotic.
You think the police did their job? They actually protected.
When you
actually
saw
provided
when you saw the clips coming out in Abuja and elsewhere, you will see tear gas, you see the protesters running, and you bring that video side by side with what happened in US, and you see US, you had a large crowd of people coming out to protest against the Trump's government, and no person pour water on the protesters. The police were there protecting them throughout the protest because it is their right. But you can't beat a child and then stop him from crying.
We've barely heard of cases, if you're bringing in the US, you've barely heard of cases where they conducted a protest and it was hijacked. We've always had stories of hijack of protests when it comes.
I have been involved in protests throughout my life. Do you know what leads to hijack of protests? Some, they are sponsored by the state to thwart the effort of the genuine protesters. Like the NSAS protest that we had. It was very peaceful everywhere until the soldiers, came in with their drums and started shooting, at the protesters. You can never see any protest that is hijacked if the state is not backing those who are hijacking those protests. Because when Nigerians go out to, look at them, they have no uniform. They're not wearing any party's t-shirt or anybody's face cap. You could see them on their just walking. So don't you have the right to walk? Have you not been seeing churches doing their procession? So what stops what they are doing here and what churches used to do in their procession on the street, on the road? What is the difference? The difference here is that because they're carrying placard, that banner that shows that the government has failed. And has the government failed? The answer is yes. Government hasn't done what government should do. If not, you'll be having protests every now and then under one regime within the space of 2 years.
Well, as we begin to wind down the conversation, who do you think should broker peace in this situation, considering that the president had made attempt earlier to invite some of the parties involved and try to broker peace between the parties, but that didn't turn out well. So who do you think, or who would you suggest, should try to mediate between these parties to ensure that they come together for the sake of the people and for the sake of democracy?
You see, I was one of those who criticized Mr. President's first intervention in this matter. I saw the president mandate or directive that was issued out to the governor, which the governor accepted to come and begin to implement. If you must bring peace between warring parties, you yourself must be sincere that you want to restore peace among the warring factions. You must not be seen or perceived to be one-sided, either in your language, either in the way you communicate or the way you move. Because sometimes you might keep quiet, but your body language speaks louder. So Mr. President's first intervention wasn't a genuine one. I said this because I have good records of how the president came and said he should add directives to the governor. I have said before that the governor is not an appointee of Mr. President. The governor was elected with a clear mandate to implement what the constitution of the country says. The governor, in fact, no governor can even remove a chairman based on our constitution, because we are operating a federative unit. Now, the president can now, having made the first attempt, which we perceive to be partisan or biased, can now bring the genuine one by saying, I have just told you the three persons who are the warring parties: the governor of the state, the FCT minister, and the speaker, to a meeting, only three of them, with the president there, and then they will now sit down there and ventilate their anger, empty what is in their mind, and then after which they will now agree to go back to the state, and then the whole thing will just die down. This whole thing has to do with, if you must have peace, you must bring all parties together to accept. You don't stay and then you back one party and give that party upper hand than the other. Okay, let's even look at it this way. The president has now suspended the governor and the assembly members. What happened to the FCT minister? Can he also be suspended by the president? The answer is yes. But he has been covered out of the entire protest by action by the president, which we now perceive that the president has powers because he appoints him to also sanction him, but he refused, and he said choose to go and sanction somebody that he has no power to sanction.
All right.
So that is where we are.
Ojogon Franklin Desong, Director for Human Rights and Accountability Network, I must thank you very much for coming on Niger Delta today. And looking at Rivers State, a lot of critics are saying they hope that this doesn't exceed 6 months, or even if it is possible that they could resolve this before the 6 months mark, it should be done. Thank you very much for your input and time and company. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that time.
All right, we'll take a break there. When we return, we'll tell our sights on the Niger Delta Games being held here in Akwa Ibom State, Uyo, the state capital, sports festival, and the updates as regards what the medal table looks like today. Stay tuned.